All right, let's get right into this. We're diving into a terrifying true story that was sent to us by a subscriber named Sahil. It's all about a trip he took with three friends to Manali. A trip that was supposed to be about healing, but instead, it turned into an absolute nightmare. So we start with this, a really chilling quote from Sahil, the guy who lived through all of this. A lullaby. It's supposed to be the ultimate sound of comfort, of safety. But for him, it's become a trigger for sheer terror. It begs the question, right? How on earth does something so innocent get twisted into something so horrifying? And this is the image at the very heart of the terror. Just try to picture it. It's the middle of the night, and you wake up to find your friend, Same, just standing there. He's staring into a mirror, and he's singing a lullaby to his own reflection. It's just so profoundly wrong. And this moment, it's the peak of an ordeal that actually started hours before, out on a dark, foggy mountain road. Okay, so let's really unpack that. Let's look at how a simple song of comfort became this permanent symbol of absolute fear. I mean, what this slide shows is just such an insane contrast. On one hand, you've got this universal symbol of love and security, a lullaby. But on the other, you see what it became for Sahil. Now it's just this haunting echo, a nightly reminder of his friend being possessed, and whatever it was that did it. To really get what happened in that hotel room, we've gotta rewind. We need to go all the way back to the start of the trip, back to a single decision they made that pretty much set this whole nightmare in motion. You see, this trip wasn't just some fun getaway. These guys were on a mission. Their friend, Samai, who was usually the life of the party, had gone completely quiet after his younger brother died tragically in an accident just a few months earlier. So this trip to Manali, it was their shot at trying to bring the old Samai back, to help him start healing. So, on their third day there, they decide to take a drive up to the famous Rotang Pass. And here you get the first little hint of foreshadowing. The name of the place itself, which they had no idea about at the time, translates to Valley of Death. Yeah, a pretty dark omen for what was waiting for them. And this is where they make that critical mistake. Before they headed out, the hotel receptionist warns them, hey, make sure you're back before 6 p.m. He tells them this local legend about a deceptive spirit that haunts the pass at night. But, they're young guys on a trip. They just blew it off. They figured it was some spooky story made up for tourists. A mistake that would completely unravel their sense of reality. Okay, and this right here, this is the point where their scenic drive just completely veers off into a full-blown waking nightmare. This number. Just a number, right? Painted on a milestone on the side of the road. It became this terrifying anchor, trapping them in some kind of supernatural loop. Manali 28 km. It should have meant they were getting closer to safety. Instead, it meant they were hopelessly, terrifyingly stuck. I mean, just look at this timeline. You can see how fast things devolved. At 9:15, they see the stone for the first time. Fine. But then 20 minutes later, after driving steadily forward, they see the exact same stone again. By the third time it shows up at 11 p.m., pure panic has set in. They realize they were stuck in a loop, and they weren't alone. But here's the thing that's maybe even creepier than the time loop itself. The truly terrifying part was that whatever was out there with them, it was playing a different trick on each of their minds. I mean, look at this. This is like a masterclass in psychological terror. Every single time they passed that stone, this thing showed each of them a different vision, basically isolating them in their own private horror show. Sahil saw a man, Chirag saw a little girl, Arun, who was driving, saw a black horse, and Samay, the one lost in his own grief, he saw nothing. But he felt this overwhelming urge insisting that someone out there needed their help. And then, all those separate visions, they suddenly snapped together into one shared, completely impossible nightmare. An apparition of a boy, maybe 15 years old, muddy and looking injured, just appears beside their car. And get this, he's keeping pace with them at 40 kilometers an hour, but he's not running. He's just walking. Casually. So while Sahil, Chirag, and Arun are frozen solid with fear, Samay does something else entirely. He just calmly says, he needs our help, rolls down his window, and waves at the boy. And as this figure starts to fade into the fog, Samay smiles and waves back. And just like that, the invitation was accepted. the door was opened. Somehow, they eventually break free from the loop and get back to the hotel around 2 a.m., completely exhausted and shaken. They just agree to figure it out in the morning, thinking the worst was over, that the horror was stuck on that road. Well, they were wrong. It had followed them home. And now we're right back where we started, that horrifying scene at 3:30 a.m. Sahil wakes up to see Somay completely possessed. The details are just bone-chilling. His eyes are red, there are marks on his neck like he's being choked by invisible hands, and he's got this creepy, small smile on his face as he sings that lullaby. It was clear that wasn't Somay anymore. So the next morning, they take Samai to a local pandit, and the priest, he takes one look at him and knows exactly what's going on. He explains that a Bura Saya, which is basically a kind of dark, malevolent spirit, had latched onto Samai's grief. It preyed on his vulnerability, pretending to be the soul of his dead brother to get permission to enter his body. So the pendant gets to work. He performs this whole series of rituals, starting with something called Nazarutarna to ward off the evil eye. Then he moves to Jardfunk, which is a much more intense chanting and exorcism ritual. And finally, a puja, a purification ceremony. After hours of this, the possession ends, and it ends with this shocking physical event. Samai violently vomits this thick, black, completely unnatural sludge. The unwanted guest had finally been kicked out. So the exorcism worked. The entity was gone. But for the friends who witnessed everything, well, the psychological scars from that night were gonna stick around forever. And here's the crazy part. Samai, he went right back to normal. He had zero memory of being possessed, no memory of singing that lullaby. He was physically free. But for Sahil, the narrator, the horror was a long way from being over. And this is what really gets me. A paranormal event might only last a single night, but the trauma, the memory of it, that can last a lifetime. Every single night, Sahil is pulled right back into that hotel room, forced to listen to the sound of his friend singing that terrifying lullaby. But there's one last thing. As his friends were backing away from him, in that room, right before he finally collapsed, the entity inside Samai spoke to them one last time, and it asked them a question in the innocent voice of a child. And that's the question that just hangs in the air. On the surface, it's such a simple request for help, but it becomes absolutely terrifying when you stop and think about what, not who, is asking. It really makes you wonder, what would you do? Would you open the window?